Last night I was finally able to see Elvis, so let's talk about it. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comment section. Share your thoughts on the movie Elvis. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Are you somewhere in the middle? Were you kind of confused by just how energetic the whole thing was? I would love to hear your thoughts on it. As we go into this review is going to be a little bit different from my normal reviews, basically because I'm about to leave town for Denver and I don't have a ton of time to make this video, so I'm going to shoot it all in one take. The reason that I'm heading to Denver is I will be at Fan Expo Denver this Saturday at 2 o'clock, leading a panel on how to grow a nerdy YouTube channel, and then at 2:45 I'll be doing a meet and greet. So if you're in Colorado, I would love to meet you. Come on out to Fan Expo Denver this Saturday, and at 2 o'clock you can see my panel, and at 2:45 you can meet me near the creator stage. Like I said, I'm going to shoot this in one take because I'm very tight on time before I have to get going and start traveling to Denver, so it'll be a little bit more raw than my usual videos. And let's get started with our review. And this is a movie that I wasn't even sure if I was going to be able to see because I've been so busy this month with different travel, different kind of other commitments. So I missed the press screening, and then because it's a 2.5 hour long movie, I wasn't quite sure when I would be able to make it. And it wasn't a movie that was particularly on my radar either. I've never had like a big Elvis phase in my life. You know, my parents grew up listening to oldies, so, you know, I know all of the hits, and whenever his album number ones came out in the late 90s, I think it was, you know, of course I went out and bought it. I'm familiar with all this music, but I've never been like super into Elvis, and my parents weren't specifically super into Elvis, just like everyone else. We enjoy some of his songs because he's got a lot of great songs and he was a great showman. So, and then likewise, Baz Luhrmann isn't a director that I naturally gravitate towards, so wasn't really even on my radar, and I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to go see it. Then, last night, I loaded my kids up in the car, drove across town to go see Minions: The Rise of Gru at the press screening on Tuesday night, only to arrive at the theater and realize the press screening was actually on Monday. So, drove back across town, threw the kids off at home, and I was like, well, I already plan to go see movies right now. So that's the reason I was actually able to see Elvis last night. And I say all of that to give you that point of reference that I wasn't really excited for this movie. The length in particular made me go, oh my goodness, this is 2.5 hours. Do I really want to see something that long? And finally went to go see it last night, and it is quite the experience. It is something else. Baz Luhrmann is one of those directors that has such a distinct style. Very early on in the movie, I was like, he must have worked on the script for this, because there's no way that you can shoot this movie, like have these shots, these transitions this way. Like, it's so stylized in the way that the story is told that almost certainly the guy that shot it had to be very involved in the entire storytelling process to be able to construct something like this. And then the credits started rolling at the end, and it's, as it turned out, his name appears twice in the screenwriting credits because of the way screenwriting credits are done. So if you work with a partner, your names are put together. So we worked with two different partners at two different phases. So his name appears twice in the screenplay credits for this movie. And likewise, this is a movie that within the first 5 minutes, I was already kind of exhausted. Because it, right out of the gate, it's just so slam bang with the editing, the cuts, the stylization. I was like, man, I don't know if I'm going to be able to keep up with this movie from beginning to end. And as I was watching through it, it's just so bombastic. It's so in your face. It's so much that I would shift between being like, wow, like, this is like the greatest thing I've ever seen, to the next moment being like, oh my goodness, this is just way too much. I don't think I'm liking this at all. This is incredible. Wow, this brought so much to life to all of this. And other times being like, man, it feels like it's keeping the characters at a distance. And then the next moment, I almost let out a hoot and a holler during one of the concert scenes when everyone else was hooting and hollering. I had to pause and be like, wait, was I just watching a movie and almost started cheering along with the audience because of how energetic and how effectively this movie captured the moment of Elvis reclaiming the stage and just knocking it out of the park. Did I almost hoot and holler while watching a movie in a theater? Yeah, that almost happened. And then the next scene, I was like, man, I wish I got to know Elvis a little bit better in this 2.5 hour long movie about Elvis. And I think that summarizes this movie really well. Someone like Elvis is so mysterious, so flamboyant, so mythological in a sense. And that's what this movie captures so well. You spend an enormous amount of time with him exploring the journey, the pain, the celebrity. And at the same time, it feels aloof. It feels distant. Like you still don't fully get the guy and what made him tick and what was going on. You learn so much about his childhood and his love for comics, how much he valued family. And then you still don't fully understand the transition as he became the legend that was Elvis. And that kind of fits perfectly, and it's kind of frustrating. And as this person that was so known at all the different phases for his tremendous sense of showmanship and style, whether in the early era of just literally having warrants out for his arrest because of his dance moves and his wiggling, or the later, all the costumes and the showiness and walking out with the stage and the sequence and just epitomizing Vegas shows. And then you get a movie that is from a director known for just way over the top flamboyance and style in the way that he captures his movies, edits them, intercuts so many different things. And you think, well, who else could capture the legend of Elvis? This isn't at all meant to be the grounded, dirty, gritty version of his life that humanizes him. It's not that at all. This is the legend of Elvis, told in a way that just captures his origin story. I mean, in a sense, it even plays his life almost like a superhero story, and it intertwines that, of his love for Captain Marvel. That was his favorite superhero, and it plays like this origin story for the superstar that is Elvis. And like I said, this is a movie that even if I'd had the time to do a normal review, I don't even know what that would look like, because it's such a distinct creative work that, as I mentioned before, Baz Luhrmann is someone that you know when you're watching a Baz Luhrmann film. And I've only seen 3 of his movies, Romeo and Juliet, Moulin Rouge, and this one, and the trailers for the other ones. And I know immediately, the pizzazz, all of it, that's Baz. Like, that's who he is. Like, there's such a distinct style to him. And especially in an era with so many corporate, studio-produced big blockbusters that I cover, that's my stuff. There's something very refreshing and exhilarating watching a movie that feels like it only could have been created by this one person. This story only could have been told by this one person, Baz Luhrmann. That's the only way this thing comes into creation. And especially as over the last month, I've had some negative reviews. I wasn't crazy about Kenobi, and it just felt kind of really disappointing to me. And Jurassic World Dominion felt like this bizarre mix of things. It was once again disappointing to me. And you could just feel the studio setup just stealing all the life out of these projects and mandatory checklists and plot beats and things like that. And then you watch this, and this just feels like a pure artistic expression of how this man wanted to tell Elvis's story, or his perspective on who Elvis is. That's what this felt like. And there's something about that I just love. That this is one person's perspective on another. Or actually 2 people, because it's really about the Colonel as well as Elvis. But it's his take on them, and his opinions, his view of the mythology. And there's something pure to that. There's flaws with it too, but there's a purity to that I thoroughly enjoy. And I really mean that. As I was watching it, I just knew he had to have been a part of writing this, because this does not remotely feel like too many cooks in the kitchen, too many people having their say and cutting off all the edges to fit it into a nice formula in a box. No, this felt like one person's artistic take. for better or for worse. Some people are going to hate it for that reason. Some people are just going to be way too much. It's just a bowl full of sugar and it makes your stomach sour from all how energetic the whole thing is. Some people are going to hate it because it didn't cover things properly. But it's one pure perspective on it. Another thing you got to talk about in here is Austin Butler as Elvis. And I'm not sure if I've seen him in anything else, at least not any significant way. I wasn't familiar with the actor's name. When I saw the trailers for it, I didn't recognize him. I've looked at his filmography and been like, okay, I guess I must have seen him in something, one of these things. But he's not someone that at all had any clue who he was. And I think that is part of why he was able to just disappear into this role. Like, I looked at some of the other people that were up for the running, read the Wikipedia page, like Miles Teller was one of the top contenders. And if I'd watched this movie and it was Miles Teller in the lead, I think I would have seen Miles Teller. Even, he's obviously a great actor, but I would have seen Miles Teller impersonating Elvis. Even if it was a phenomenal performance, that's what I would have seen. And because I'm not familiar with this guy, this was a really cool performance of just this guy becomes someone else. And when you have someone like Elvis that had such a distinct accent, he moved such a distinct way. There's all these, we've all seen quotes, we've all seen him sing before. It's very easy to just go into impersonation mode where all you see is a guy doing a great Elvis impersonation. And so when you're able to just capture the character and it doesn't feel like an impersonation with someone that iconic, that's special. And I think a big part of that was, I didn't know who this Austin Butler guy was. And he's able to just kind of disappear into the role. And the first part of it, maybe like when he's young, I think that's where you could feel maybe a little bit of impersonation in there. But as the movie went along and he turned into older Elvis, there's really starts to be this transformative thing because you're watching this person who's in pain, who's miserable, but every time he's on stage, he gives it his all. And you're watching him like perform as drunk Elvis and as just depressed Elvis and like collapsing Elvis. And he's able to have all the energy and his eyes communicate all the pain. That's something remarkable. That is something very impressive that this film was able to do. Now, since I was late to the party watching this movie, I'd heard some people discussing Tom Hanks's performance, and it seemed like there's some mixed reviews from it. At least that was my impression of like it was an odd performance. Maybe it's because he was just so drenched in makeup and the look was. I just saw the character. I was able to disappear into it. I didn't feel like I was watching Tom Hanks, and even while watching the movie, I was like, oh yeah, I'm watching Tom Hanks. And maybe that didn't work for other people. It worked for me. I was able to just see the character in there. And so I don't know if you'd say that it seems like a mostly positive review because I've just been talking about this director having such a distinct style, great performances, capturing the myth, the legend. I think on the negative side, the big thing that I think limits this film in a sense for me is that they choose the framing device of the story essentially being told by the Colonel, by Tom Hanks's character. And so then it's very intertwined with the controversy of this manager who was a very complicated person in that he was the person that in many ways brought Elvis to us. And then it seems like in all these other ways, he was just exploiting Elvis and just ground him into the... Literally, probably seems to have been responsible for grinding him up and spinning through this machine, cranking out performances until it killed him because he coped through drug use. It didn't seem like he was watching out for what was best for him. That's the perspective of the film, at least. Because you tell his story through that lens and that perspective, it felt like there was points in time where it felt like it missed moments of like celebration of like, wow, it montaged through things with just like, yeah. And then there were a bunch of hits and it felt like there's a moment there where you could capture the humanity of like, what did Elvis feel in that moment? What was the moment of victory there that it didn't quite capture, it seemed like, kind of because of this framing device. Likewise, there's a point in time where it montages through like 10 years where he goes to Hollywood and does these movies, and it just does kind of this awkward thing of him getting lost in Hollywood. And it's a very long movie, but it just flies by 10 years like that. Like, he joins the military, and then he's in Hollywood, and all of a sudden he needs a comeback. And it just felt like there's more there to, like, capture the lostness than just a montage could capture. And I like what was like, as much as the movie communicates so much about what his life was like, it just very quickly gives you bullet points for what 10 years of his life was. And it was literally him in the military, him making a bunch of movies, putting out a bunch of albums. Just flies by like that. And it also feels like a bit of an odd perspective to, if you're going to tell like this flashy of a person's life with this type of director, and you used to tell the story in a manner where it's filled through the perspective of this other guy, kind of. I think you miss some things. Like, you want to capture who Elvis was, the man and the myth, and it's told in a way that just captures the myth, and some of that is because it's so driven by the perspective of the Colonel in his defenses of himself. And it just felt like, as I said kind of at the beginning of this, and now again, it just felt like it kept both characters at a distance. So it captures that the Colonel was responsible so much good in Elvis's life, but also so much bad. And it certainly discusses the mystery of who was this guy, and was he really, and what's going on there. But you really don't understand what makes that guy tick and what he's really thinking. Like, it keeps both of our two lead characters at a distance of understanding who they were, and it maybe almost intentionally keeps them mysterious as to how conflicted they were, of Elvis being such a family man at the beginning and being so bad with his own family and own wife and daughter, and many of these different things of just, you never really understand what led to these choices besides fame was too much, gambling addiction, wanted to be famous. And so it just, like, I know that was the thing to me that I felt like was missing there. As much as it captures this legend and the myth and the pizzazz, the style, fantastic performances, I wish they didn't feel so distant. I wish I got to know them more. And I wish that we didn't have to montage through so many things. Like, even thinking back through the movie, it's such a long movie, like 2 hours, 40 minutes or whatever it was. And if I think back through what happened in it, it's like it only really zeroes in on a couple windows at a time and then flies over a bunch of other stuff. So it goes really deep on these specific windows at a time. And I don't know, maybe there's some way to adjust that a little bit to help me understand some of these other, like, literal a decade time jump happens. Like that, a quick little montage of him on holding on to a, pretending like he's being pulled by a boat, pretending like he's water skiing, and doing this Hollywood montage of him losing himself and using that image of him as the metaphor for him getting lost. So, what are my overall thoughts on it? I think it's a flawed film, but a very cool film. I'm glad that it exists. I think for the most part, it absolutely captured what it was going for. I love that it's a unique director's perspective on it. Austin Butler knocked it out of the park. I thought Tom Hanks did a great job. And I think that maybe even the reason this kind of works is that Tom Hanks plays the person that you're not as familiar with, that you haven't seen the face of. So familiar actor can disappear into that. And then you have Elvis, this persona that we all know so well. So you get the unknown actor to play him so he can disappear into it. And that pairing, I think, went nicely. And by the end of it, I was like, yeah, this is a very cool film to exist. If you're going to tell the King's story, you need a director like this that just pours so much energy into it. It's like the script, the editor, and the director all were cranked up on Red Bull and cocaine the whole time, and captures that mythological sense that you want from an Elvis film. Well, in the same sense, I wish that we did get a little bit more of the humanity in there too. So overall, I'll give this one an A-. A very good film. Absolutely recommend checking it out. If you're someone that's in any way familiar with Elvis, check out the film. Just know it's exhausting. It is very long, but it captures the myth and the tragedy of Elvis very well. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Remember, if you're in the Denver area, I will be at Fan Expo Denver this Saturday at 2 o'clock, leading a panel, and at 2:45 doing a meet and greet. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies too much. Bye-bye.